Welcome to the Empty Cup. I'm Tsering Padron, and this podcast is a small pause in the middle of our busy lives. A moment to look more closely at our mind, at our reactions, our fears, our hopes, and also the possibility of meeting life with more clarity and kindness. And these reflections are not about having the right answers. There is no right or wrong here. They're just invitations to slow down, to question the things we assume, and perhaps be more open to the simplicity of the moment. So wherever you are, just take a breath, hold your empty cup, and let us pour some tea for thought. Today, I would like to talk about humility, a word that can have quite a negative connotation for us Westerners. For some people, it means thinking poorly of oneself, like making oneself smaller, remaining in the background, not acknowledging one's qualities, almost becoming invisible. But I don't think that is humility. That is more often insecurity or sometimes a bad opinion of oneself, like feeling we haven't really lived up to our own expectations or others' expectations. It is more like we now call low self-esteem. But humility is not feeling less than others, nor is it feeling more than others. It is something much quieter. It is the gradual release of a contraction. The contraction around the one who says, I. My life, my suffering, my success, my failure. The more we look closely, the stranger this little word becomes. Who exactly is this I? In Tibetan, one of the words translated as I is dak. And dak also means owner, the lord, the possessor, the one who says, my body, my thoughts, my mind, my life. As though there were someone sitting inside experiencing, owning it all. But where exactly? It can't be the body because it says my body. It can't be the thoughts because they too belong to me. It can't even be the mind because that is also my mind. So who exactly is this mysterious owner? Where is it dwelling? What's its nature? We might not be able to pinpoint it, and yet something goes on. Walking happens, thinking happens, loving happens, teaching happens. Life goes on beautifully. Only the owner becomes difficult to find. I come to think sometimes that we are a little bit like a tent. A tent appears when a piece of cloth, a few ropes, and some poles are brought together in a particular arrangement. For a while, we call it a tent. It shelters us. It has a function. Then the ropes are untied, the poles removed, the fabric folded. Where did the tent go? Nothing was lost. Nothing traveled anywhere. The space that was held inside the tent just merged with the outer space. The conditions simply changed. Perhaps we are a bit like that too. For a few decades, causes and conditions came together in a particular way. A name appears, a personality, a voice, a face. People say, oh, there is Tsering. And conventionally, that is perfectly true. Just as it is perfectly true to say, well, there is a tent. But something in us quietly believes that there is an owner behind the arrangement, someone who possesses this life, someone who must constantly defend it. And perhaps humility begins the moment that certainty starts to soften. Then another discovery follows. I'm not as separate as I imagine. Neither is anyone else. The person sitting opposite me wants exactly what I want. To be happy, not to suffer, to be understood, seen, to feel safe. Their fears might look different, their story might be different, the intensity of their emotions might differ from mine, but fundamentally we are remarkably alike. I think humility is born there. Not because we become insignificant, but because we stop imagining we occupy a privileged position at the center of existence. And curiously, this doesn't erase differences. Some people know more than I do, some know less, some have greater responsibility, some require more support. Wisdom doesn't pretend these relative differences don't exist. It simply no longer turns them into superiority or inferiority. There is just what each moment asks. With that, then, relationships begin to change. We stop trying so hard to fix everyone, to rescue, to convince, to become indispensable. Because sometimes, if we are really honest, helping others secretly makes us feel important, needed, valuable. But when ownership begins to dissolve, even helping changes its flavor. We no longer need to extract an identity from being useful. We aren't saviors. Love becomes lighter, quieter, more respectful. We learn that receiving is not inferior to giving. Sometimes allowing someone to help us is itself an act of generosity. It's just that we stop counting. We stop keeping score. Perhaps this is why true humility often feels so spacious. Because there is nothing, or perhaps much less, left to prove. Nothing left to defend or to possess. Only this extraordinary opportunity to participate in life. Like a wave participating in the ocean. Every wave is unique. No two movements are ever identical. And yet, no wave is fundamentally separate from the water. The form differs, the nature never does. Perhaps humility is simply remembering the water. Compassion then, becomes almost inevitable. Because how could one wave feel superior to another, or inferior, for that matter? They rise together, they fall together, they return together. Their movements are intertwined. And perhaps this changes also the way we accompany other human beings. We no longer arrive carrying answers or solutions, opinions, or even ourselves. We simply come, sometimes with words, sometimes with silence, sometimes with a cup of tea, even an empty one. Sometimes simply sitting beside someone whose heart is breaking, not trying to remove their pain, not trying to become the hero of their story, simply remaining like a lamp left burning in the window for someone coming home late. Just quietly saying, I'm here. Perhaps that's humility. Not becoming smaller, not becoming bigger, simply becoming transparent enough that love can pass through us without needing to be ours. Humility, I think, it's not thinking less of ourselves. It is just no longer mistaking ourselves for the owner of this life. Unlike sometimes in Western culture, where humility is sometimes seen as a low self-esteem or lack of confidence, humility is highly regarded in some cultures. In Tibetan culture, as in many traditional Asian cultures, humility is often expressed outwardly through deference, modesty, self-effacement, and careful speech. Those forms serve valuable social functions and can generally reflect in the realization, but they are not the realization itself. One can be outwardly very modest, while inwardly constantly comparing, seeking approval, or secretly feeling superior. And conversely, someone can be direct, confident, humorous, even seemingly irreverent, while having very little sense of self-importance. I think maybe true humility has to be the natural expression of seeing that there is no separate owner at the center of experience. It cannot be measured by how small we make ourselves appear, but by how little we need to make everything about ourselves. And this is what I felt like sharing today. So until the next time, keep the cup empty and the heart open.